Hello, my name's Kingsley Singleton, Deputy Editor of Digital Photo, and welcome to this Photoshop video lesson. As you'll see in the magazine, this issue we're showing you how you can use your camera and software together to make amazing images. Now, you're probably thinking this is kind of what you try and do already. Any digital photographer worth his or her salt knows that the best way to get great pictures is to shoot as well as you can and then enhance or correct results in Photoshop. But what we're talking about here is something different. This is the process of actually shooting separate images with the full intent of using them as part of something greater, a kind of constructed image, if you will. This goes a lot further than making minor tweaks, and if you follow the projects in the magazine and on this CD, you'll see that it's possible to quickly and easily create a wide variety of stunning images in this way. Whether it's eye-catching trick photography, creative ways to light your pictures, or full-on surreal composites like this one, you'll find a common thread. The key is to begin with the end in mind. So for example, in this image, I knew that the lighting and the angle of view would have to be consistent if all the separate elements were to marry up nicely into a finished image. So starting with the background picture of Biggin Hill Aerodrome, a shot I had on file, I could see that the sun was shining from above left. That meant that when shooting the fans, it needed to be in the same place to make the lighting consistent. But not only that. For the fans to appear to be looming above the landscape, they also needed to be shot from slightly below, and with enough blue sky behind them to make adding them into the existing scene a lot easier. You'll see all this in more detail as we begin working through the technique, but essentially thinking this way in advance really helps the process and avoids too many fiddly cutouts. The same goes for all these paper planes. They're also all lit from the top left, so all the shadows will line up nicely, and we come back to that idea of consistency. We've also made sure that the paper planes are sharp from front to back, so there are no focus problems when it comes to inserting them into the scene. All this means that although this is a surreal looking image, it actually has an air of photorealism too. Certainly enough to make the viewer look twice and wonder just how you did it. And that's what we're going to look at in this lesson, using the images shot as I've just described, and then using the layers palette mostly in Photoshop, and a few other little tricks to tie them all together. So we go from a start image, which is our aerodrome here. Nothing unusual about that at all, and then we'll start inserting these rather strange and surreal looking fans into the landscape, just tying them into the clouds there using layer masks and making sure they sit in with the scenery really nicely. And then we'll move on and we'll add our paper planes, one stuck in the ground here. We'll give that one a shadow to tie it into the surroundings, and then we'll add a few more around the scene, each one added in the same way to complete our picture. Okay, so make sure you've got the start images ready if you want to follow along with me, but what we really want you to do is give it a quick practice and then have a go using your own pictures, following along with the shooting tips that are in the magazine and seeing what kind of exciting and surreal composites you can come up with. Okay, so let's close down our example image and then we'll come up to File and down to Open. And to start off, we'll pick the image called bigginhill.jpg and fan1.jpg, just holding down the Control key to select both of them at the same time there, and then we'll click Open. And the first thing we want to do is cut and paste our fan image into our wider landscape. So come over to the toolbox and we'll pick the freehand lasso tool, give that a click, and then we'll just draw very, very roughly around the fan. No need to worry about the base there. Up around the top again. Back to the start, wait till the marching ants appear, and then we'll come up to Edit and down to Copy, close down the fan picture, then back on bigginhill.jpg, back up to Edit and down to Paste. In drops the fan, and if I bring my layers palette in to the screen, just from the side there, you can see there that it's floating above the background layer. Now this is an absolutely vital way in which the layers palette helps us create composite images. Because these two layers are separate of one another, they can be moved around and resized independently. So if I come over to the Move tool here in the toolbox, come up to the Options bar and click Show Transform Controls, you can see that a little bounding box appears around all the pixels on that layer, and then I can hold down the Shift key and just click and drag on these corner handles to resize the fan and make it work with the rest of the scene. Now holding down the shift key is really important here, because if we don't do that, things will get very distorted, and we want to keep the picture exactly as it was shot really, only changing its dimensions, not skewing it around. So we'll just undo that. Make sure we've got that shift key held down while we're resizing. And if you want to resize it without holding down the shift key, just click on the maintain aspect ratio icon up there in the options bar, and you can do it in just the same way. So what we're going to do is just click and drag our fan roughly into this part of the image. Something around about there should be okay. I think we're just going to need to straighten it up slightly as well. So just rotate it a little bit just by bringing the icon outside of the bounding box there and clicking and dragging. Just we want to get that stand nice and straight. That looks okay to me. I might just shift it over ever so slightly more, and we'll just poke it off the top of the picture there, enlarge it a little bit. Something around about there should be okay. So when that's sitting roughly on that right hand third, we can click the tick to finish the transformation. And if you want to get rid of the transform controls while you're working, just untick that show transform controls button up there too. Now, as I said in the introduction, I deliberately shot this fan from slightly below to get the angle right, but also against a bright blue sky. This means that not only do we get the right kind of reflections on its surface, it's also much easier to bed it in against the sky. First thing we're going to have to do though is just lighten up the sky around the fan a little bit, and going back to this idea of the fan being on a separate layer, once again this makes it really simple. All we need to do is bring up the levels palette, so we'll come up to image, down to adjustments and pick levels, or you can press Ctrl and L on the keyboard. That'll then bring up the levels palette, and what you'll see is if I click and drag the midtone slider around, we're only controlling the levels on this layer, not the background layer, and that means if I just shift it over to the left a little bit, just look at that little patch of blue sky. We're just matching that up really nicely, just lightening up those midtones. Don't want to push it too far so it's too light, don't want to have it over here where it's too dark. Something around about there is looking pretty much spot on. So once you've got a pretty close match, just hit OK. And then I'm also just going to soften the focus on the fan ever so slightly, because it's meant to be sitting right far off in the distance like this enormous, huge kind of towering science fiction structure. We just want to kind of lose a little bit of definition on it, just as we're getting on these kind of distant clouds. Very simply, we're going to do that by adding a little bit of Gaussian blur to it. So with layer 1 still highlighted in the layers palette there, just come up to filter, down to blur, and pick Gaussian blur. Now what we've got here is way too much currently, but to fix that we'll just drag that radius slider down to about 0.4, 0.5 pixels, just kind of taking the sharpness off ever so slightly and matching it in with those far off details. Click OK to exit that palette, and then before we apply a mask, just to start cleaning up these edges and making the fan work really nicely with the clouds that are currently behind it, but ones that we're going to kind of bring in over the top of it to really bed it in. I'm also just going to look a little bit at the saturation of our new layer, and though it's kind of looking pretty much the same as the background, it's always worth pressing Ctrl and U on the keyboard, or coming up to image, adjustments, and down to hue saturation, and just clicking and dragging that saturation slider around a little bit until you've got a nice kind of close match between those two layers. So here I'm thinking something around about +10 is just kind of giving it a little bit more similarity there. So +8 we'll go for, and we'll click OK. Okay, so that's pretty much as far as we can go in tying the fan into its surroundings using the levels palette and the hue saturation palette. We've managed to control the lighting and the colour there. It's looking pretty good, but we've still got this nasty hard edge that we need to get rid of. So what I'm going to do is add a layer mask to layer 1, the fan layer, so that we can start bedding it in much more nicely. To add a layer mask, either come down to the foot of the layers palette and click the add layer mask icon, Or you can come up to Layer, down to Layer Mask, and pick Reveal All. There in the Layers palette you'll see the mask appear next to Layer 1, and what we're going to do now is start painting into the mask to hide or reveal the areas of Layer 1 that we do or we don't want to see. Now the way we're going to do this is by painting black to start with into the mask. So over in the toolbox we'll first click on the brush tool. Up here in the options bar we'll set its size down to about 150 pixels. Make sure that that opacity is at 100%. And then crucially, make sure that you're painting black as your foreground colour. To do that, just click on the default colour icon there or press D on the keyboard and then either hit the arrow next to the colours or press X on the keyboard to swap them over. So now we've got black, we can start clicking and painting into the mask. As I do that, you'll see black areas appear within the mask, and those denote the areas where the photo below is being allowed to show through. So I'm just working quite quickly at the moment, just roughly around the edge, taking away that hardness. Of course I'm using a soft edge brush here, and if yours doesn't look like that, just come up to the brush menu and take that hardness down to 0%. Now there are some good keyboard shortcuts to know when you're working with the brush tool, and those involve the square bracket keys on the keyboard. So if we want to say reduce our brush size a little bit, we hit the left square bracket key. We want to bring it up a bit, we hit the right square bracket key, and then by holding down the shift key we can use both of those keys again, either to soften up the edge of the brush, again hitting left, or harden it up, hitting the right square bracket. And you can see that happening in the brush preview at the top of the screen. So as I work down the picture, I'm just going to harden up that edge of the brush slightly and just follow the line of the stand as we move down the picture, working quite quickly here of course, and just kind of reducing that brush size as we go. We don't want the edge to be at the maximum hardness, we're just kind of keeping it a little below that, and so we're just working down, getting rid of those parts of the original photo that we don't want to see. So all of this can go, don't want any of that at all. Just painting all over those areas, and you'll see again there in the mask that it's filling up with black, and those are the areas that are being hidden from view. And then we'll just work up the other side. Don't worry about this area at the bottom right now. And you'll see there I've probably taken a little bit too much off the side there. So I'll just press Ctrl and Z on the keyboard and just have another little go at it. It's working a little bit more closely to the edge. And then coming over and doing the same thing on the left hand side here, just working up. Take a little bit more time over this at home, but as I say, I'm sort of working quite quickly so we can show you just how it goes together, and sort of getting to a point where it's starting to look okay, but we'll just zoom in a little bit further and drop that brush size as we start to work up around the more detailed areas. Now I've just gone over that part of the fan there, so the other way I can fix a mistake when using a layer mask is just to press X on the keyboard, or again hit the arrow icon in the toolbox. That swaps it over to white, and then I can just paint back in that area. Again, of course, I'm not painting black or white onto the actual photo, I'm just painting it into the mask, so that's what's helping me hide or reveal the layer below. So just continuing to work up there, gone over a little bit again. Just go back to white, just missed out a bit of the stand too, but quite quickly there you can see that we're beginning to blend the fan into the background quite well. So just coming back down to the base of the fan for a moment, you can see that obviously now it's kind of hovering over these trees, and we want to tie it in so it looks like it's sitting behind them. So we'll just go back to white that we're painting. Just bring it over the top of the trees to start with, and then come in a little bit closer, then switching back to black as our foreground colour. We can just start sort of chipping away at those areas until we just bring in that first very tiny bit of the sky beyond, so we know roughly where those trees are coming in. So clearly we've gone a little bit too far there, so it's back to white. Dropping that brush size even further, and I think just softening the edge ever so slightly too. And then we'll just kind of begin to just paint those tiny little bits of white in there. Maybe soften that brush up even further and keep just clicking around that tree line until it begins to look like it's sort of sitting right behind it. Still got a little bit of a halo over there, but coming out to a slightly wider view, that's starting to look okay, I think. And because of the way we've masked that lower area in, it now seems to be sitting right on that horizon. It's still looking a little bit sort of plonked in though, a bit like that proverbial sore thumb. So what we're going to do is apply a few special little tricks just to bed it in even more nicely. The first of these is to continue our masking work, applying it to the clouds up here at the top of the image and just making them seem like they're overlapping the fan a little bit so that it appears really to be sitting behind them. That's going to give it a real sense of scale and add depth to the picture. And it's very easy to do. First we're just going to drop the opacity of layer 1 here in the layers palette. Click on the opacity slider and take that down to about 30 or 40% just so we can see those clouds that are behind the top of the fan there. Then we'll zoom back in on it and making sure that our layer mask is still active there, that it's got this frame around it so that we're not painting onto the layer itself, we're definitely painting into the mask. We'll come back over to the brush tool, make sure that we've got black as our foreground colour again, bring that brush size up, and then we'll just start painting roughly over where we know those clouds are. Just drop that opacity even further, I think, down to about 30%. So we know where those clouds are. We can just start kind of painting them in down the bottom here. And what will happen once we've painted over the clouds fairly briskly again is that when I bring the opacity of that layer back up to 100%, they appear to be sitting in front of it. So you see that very quickly and easily, by effectively hiding the parts of layer 1 that we don't want to see and letting those clouds behind show through, it seems like they're kind of peeping over in front of it, and suddenly we get that sense of photorealism that we're looking for. Obviously it's a surreal and fantastical looking image, but just using little tricks in this way help us kind of, I suppose, confuse the viewer a little bit and just make them, as I said in the introduction, look twice and kind of wonder how you did it. So although it's a kind of an extreme example, effectively they're thinking, is that really there? How can it be kind of behind those clouds? And it's all thanks to a clever little bit of layer masking. What we can do is continue to just work around that area of the image, again switching between black and white and working into our mask, just so we make sure that we don't have any sort of blue sky showing through, we just have the fluffy cloud, and very quickly you'll be able to create something really, really good looking. It's quite a good idea to just click the layer visibility icon on and off as you do this, and for instance up here on this line of cloud along here, you'll see that it's a little bit rough and ready, the version that we've got, so we can continue here to just kind of work in those nice kind of crinkly edges of the cloud. So that's looking pretty good, and we see that it actually kind of extends a little bit further down here, but we're also again sort of bringing in a little bit too much of that blue, so we go back to white as the colour we're painting into our mask, and we just chip away at it. And a really good trick here, just to give you that extra nice approach, is just to drop the opacity of the brush that you're using up here in the options bar. Just take it down to about 10 or 20%, and then you can continue just to kind of keep clicking into the mask. And because you're kind of painting effectively shades of grey rather than pure black or pure white, you get a sort of a transition effect. So you just allow little bits more of that fan to poke through as if it's just kind of coming through the haze there, and we start to build up a really excellent look. Okay, so just coming back out to a full view again there, we can see that yeah, that fan is really starting to work very well. And once we're happy with all of that masking that we've done, particularly on the stand, one last thing that we can do just to help out our layer masking there is just bring our brush size right up to about 500 or 600 pixels. Keep that opacity down at a low 10%. Switch back to black as the foreground colour, and then I'm just going to click a few times near the base of the fan, just to sort of mimic that kind of haziness that's going on near the horizon. You see there the trees in the distance, they're becoming a little bit sort of blue and hazy, and we can do the same thing with the base of our fan there, just kind of once again tying it nicely into its surroundings. One thing to watch out for when you're doing this though, is that if you click too many times and you make the fan sort of too light there, you're effectively showing through a bit too much of the background, and it's going to be coming through that stand. So what that's doing is it's going to make the thing look translucent, and that's not what you want at all. It's meant to be a solid object, even though it's a bit hazy in the distance. So how can we get around that problem? Well, the simplest way, if you want to go for this kind of nice hazy effect, and that's certainly what we're after here, is to put something behind the fan, between the background layer and the fan layer. Now that might sound a little bit complicated, but it'll make more sense as I add it. So what we're going to do is click on the background layer, come up to Layer, down to New, and pick Layer, just hit OK. And on this new blank layer, what we're going to do is just paint in a little bit of new background that's nice and flat, and therefore won't show through the stand as these kind of edges of the clouds. To do this, pick out the clone stamp tool there in the toolbox, and up in the options bar, set it to around 50 pixels inside. Take that hardness up to about 50%, keep the opacity at 100%, and then over next to where it says sample, make sure that one says current and below. So effectively we're going to be sampling the background layer. We're going to be holding down the Alt key to bring up our sample icon there, clicking on a clean area of cloud, and what you'll see is when I click and paint in this area here, we lose that hard line of cloud that was running behind the fan, and this time we end up with a nice solid but still hazy looking stand. A little bit up here too, we can just paint over, and though this is a fairly small addition in the process of making our composite image here, it really is worth doing this because it makes the picture look that much more realistic. Just taking away any of those hard lines of clouds that appear to be running through the stand, and we'll just carry on painting down here until we've got something that we're happy with. And if I play around just briefly with the layer visibility here, you'll see what's happened. I can turn off the fan, I can turn off the background, and what we've done is we've copied in this this new area here, this fairly flat area of sky, and though it looks pretty mucky on our background layer, once the fan's there, it makes much more sense. It's really helping us tie it into the background and getting rid of any of those nasty translucent effects that we don't want. Something else that we can have a look at while we're zoomed in on the fan is this line that's running down it. Now this is a reflection of something when it was shot. I'm not sure what it was, it may even be me, but one thing I do know is that we don't want it in our picture. It wouldn't be there in real life. I know it's pretty odd banding around words and phrases like real life when we've got these giant fans, but just bear with me. What we're going to do is click back on the fan layer, that's layer 1 at the top of the layers palette there. Just bring our clone stamp tool down in size to around 20 or 30 pixels, and then this time we'll just clone an area of the fan there over the top, just kind of selecting what we call a clean area, an area without the distraction. Each time holding down that Alt key, clicking to select that area, and then just painting over the top, and very quickly we can remove that line that we don't want. Once again, it's a very small addition, but these are the kind of things that are really important when you're doing these kind of tricky composites. It's all about attention to detail, and the more attention you pay to the details, the more you'll fool the viewer. So just zooming out to a wider view again, and just like that, with a clever little bit of transforming work and some neat layer masking, we've managed to bed the fan really nicely into the scene, and it's starting to look like it really belongs. It's quite at home now on that horizon, I think. So what I'm going to do is load up 2 more fans, that's fan 2 and fan 3, which you'll also find on this month's CD, and I'm going to put them into the picture in exactly the same way as I did before. So I'll do that right now, and I'll join you in a moment. Okay, so here we are with our 2 extra fans added, and as I said, they were done in exactly the same way as the first one that we added into the picture. No sleight of hand involved on our part. And we can zoom in and take a look at them. Once again, they've been blurred out a little bit and had their levels altered, so they're a little bit brighter and they match up with the sky. And this one in particular, I've moved that mid-tone slider quite a long way over to the left this time, just to kind of make it seem like it's quite far off in the distance. And it's just beginning to lose that bit of clarity as you'd expect, a bit like as if you were looking at a sort of a far-off skyscraper, really. Once again, the layer masks worked in exactly the same way, and if I just disable the layer mask there, I just holding down the Shift key and clicking on it in the Layers palette, we get the red X through it and it disables the mask. We can see the original picture that was dropped in, those hard edges. We've tried to kind of match the lighting in the sky in there, got it nearly there, enough so that our masking will be able to kind of come in on top and tie everything together. And just the same with our other fan there. We can see how the black has been painted in around the edges and just helping that little cloud show over the top. Just once again to sort of give it that kind of sense of depth, really. Just that sort of multi-layered feel that's really kind of adding that photoreal effect that we want. So that's the first stage of our surreal composite image finished. We've added in our fans, and thanks to the layers palette and a little bit of clever layer masking, we've gone from our starting point, our empty landscape, and we've got them sitting in there quite nicely. But as powerful and flexible as the layers palette is, and as much as these layer masks help us combine our fans with the landscape, really the most important thing was how we shot them. Photographing them from slightly below helps us give them this kind of believable angle, making them seem like they really are towering above the skyline, and perhaps even more importantly, the fact that we shot them in the same lighting conditions and against a very similar sky has made introducing them into the scene a lot more simple. Okay, join me in the next video lesson when we'll be adding our paper planes into the mix and doing a little bit of work with shadows and blending modes just to finish off our surreal composite image. See you next time.